so good afternoon to everybody.
Oh, let me take this mask off.
Yeah.
Just a second. So I do want to thank everybody for sticking around for the press conference, and do want to thank Councilman Wilson for all the support and everything that we've been able to accomplish in getting to this point. And again, we're both going to be sharing comments. Just thought I'd jump out here and just kind of start with just some general comments. We are seeing this as an opportunity. We appreciate the council for being willing to commission this subcommittee. We've used subcommittees in the past to address a number of issues and to make recommendations to the mayor and the council. And believe it or not, there's actually been some good that's come from those. So this is another opportunity for us to use this platform and to use this opportunity again to create some dialogue. We're not going to run from this issue. Not going to run from the issue of race. We're not going to run from the social issues that are present. As Americans, I think it's important for us to hit head on some of these issues. Just because we don't talk about them or make a decision not to talk about them, it doesn't mean that they're going to go away. There are going to be some issues that need to be addressed and need to be discussed in a public forum. So this again gives a number of the members of our community a platform to talk about a number of these issues. And again, I'm excited about that point. So before I hand it off to Councilman Wilson to give us some of the mechanics and the details behind it, I'm going to share something with y'all that happened to me pretty recently. And again, I want to preface it by saying this: by and large, the vast majority of the people that I encounter on a daily basis, hate racism just as much as I do. I mean, and I get that, so it's very clear that racists are in the minority. And this subcommittee will not just be addressing racism per se, even though that is a flashpoint, an emotional flashpoint in this season. But there will also be some recommendations and things that we'll ask them to look at relative to policing as well. So some of the things that have been brought up and brought to this council in the past will be discussed, and again, we'll take a look at solutions that can work for the vast majority of citizens in the city. But so kind of a long segue into what happened to me just here recently. Guys, I think I clean up okay. I mean, I brush my teeth and, I bathe, I do all those things you're supposed to do and try to clean up all right. And so I was at a location that I support. I'm trying not to identify anybody in my story, but I'm at a location that I support, and a sheriff's deputy was actually issuing some official paperwork, and I have my parents to blame. Both of my parents are approaching 70 years old, and they still look relatively young, and so I get, and because I'm small in stature and I look like my parents, I think sometimes I get mistaken for being a lot younger than what I am. And so, I go out, I have a conversation with the sheriff's deputy. I signed for the documents. We kind of exchanged some dialogue. It's, nothing extraordinary. It's just normal. And so he leaves. Well, where I was sitting, I have office space in that building, and where I was sitting, I can actually hear, if the conditions are right, I can hear what's being said in the lobby. This sheriff's deputy comes back in, and I'm quoting to a large degree what he said, but young lady that works with me walks out into the lobby and she says, "Can I help you?" He says, "I was in here a minute ago, and I had there was a gentleman, that boy that was out here a minute ago signed for some paperwork. Do you happen to know his name? And she said, just a second. And she walked around to my office and the blood had already just drained from her face. And I said, did he just call me a boy? And she kind of looked at me and she said, well, and I said, look, I said, it's probably not a good idea for me to go out there because, it's probably going to be taken all kinds of wrong. So why don't you give him this card? That way he'll have my name and he won't have to engage me and I won't have to engage him. So everybody on that hallway, they're all good people. And one after the other came in and just tried to apologize profusely. Derek, we're sorry. We don't think like that. I don't want you to think, and my point is there's a part of me that believes that individual didn't mean anything by it. He just, maybe I just look young and, that's the way he addresses people that look young, calls them boy. But then there's a part of me that kind of understands the reality of it. And the reality of it, and there's a gentleman in the back of the room who knows exactly what I'm talking about. The reality of it is there are 4 other white males on that hallway, and they all look younger than me. And had they gone out there and engaged him in the same kind of dialogue, they would not have been referred to as a boy. This is 2020. This is not 1968. This is 2020. And I'm not saying any of that to be confrontational or divisive. That's not the intent, but it's an opportunity for us to understand that there's a need for dialogue. And there's a need for us as a society to marginalize those kinds of people. We have got to make them feel uncomfortable. We've got to marginalize those kinds of people or get them to understand the error of their ways and get them to understand how it is necessary for both sides to work together and not view either individual or either group as less than the other. Again, none of what we're going to talk about today is intended to be divisive. It's not intended to be confrontational. What we're wanting to do is build bridges. And again, the whole purpose in sharing that story is I just want people to understand you can't ignore it. It's here. It's 2020. It's in front of us. You can't ignore it. This is an opportunity for us to address a lot of it. Councilman Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Again, I just want to, and we'll provide to the media a list of the members of the committee as it's formed afterwards. But again, I just want to kind of give it a general overview of what the goal is of the committee. And to Councilman Williams' point, I just want to say, this is not some unprecedented committee. There are literally hundreds of these all over the community, and I don't care where you come down on the side of all this Black Lives Matter, this greater conversation that's happening in our country right now. There's a lot of people that think that it's totally made up and that there's nothing to it. And those people are entitled to their opinion, and there's a lot of people, millions of people out there that think it's a real issue. So what you do when you're in a position of leadership, whether you like it or not, having one group of our citizens standing on one side of the street yelling and having a group of citizens standing on the other side of the street yelling is a bad thing in any community. It's a bad thing. There's a right way and a wrong way to have civil conversations about issues that are affecting our community. And you can't just say, well, I don't feel that way, so it's not real. You can't just say, well, I never experienced that as a kid, so it must be fake. What we all have to do as citizens is elevate our thinking above our own perspective and say, I recognize that even though I didn't have that experience growing up, or even though I've had certain experiences that shape my opinion, there are 330 million people in this country, and they all have a different experience, and they all have a different perspective, and every one of them is equally valid. So we can, or has the right to be heard. And so the point of something like a Human Relations Advisory Committee is to build a platform to hopefully prevent what we've seen happen in other parts of the country from happening right here in Gadsden. Because I want to make it a point, in all of this process, there hasn't been, to my knowledge, I don't know this for a fact, but to my knowledge, there hasn't been one instance of vandalism or a business being burnt down by rioters or protesters. We haven't had a shot fired at any of the events that have happened in this community. We are not Seattle. We're not New York. We're not Washington, D.C. We're not Chicago. We're Gadsden, Alabama, and that's all I care about is Gadsden, Alabama. We've become so engulfed in national politics that we forget what really matters, which is our neighbors, our communities, our households, the people we know. These are people that you see every day, that you go to church with, that you work with, that you, in some cases, they're your doctor, your lawyer, your accountant, the person who cooks your food or changes your oil. These are members of our community, and that's different. That's different than national politics. You know, there's a reason why city council members do not run under a party affiliation, because political parties do not matter in local politics. What matters is how we keep our community functioning and growing together. And the only point of this Human Relations Advisory Committee is to give an avenue for people who feel like either perceived or actual biases exist in this community that cause a level of divisiveness in this community. And are there things, if we get the smartest people in the room together and talk about it, are there things we can do to mitigate those instances or to eliminate them altogether? And so, again, I'll just start with some general definitions, and I'll be quick, and we can wrap this up and take any questions you may have. But the HRAC has been created to facilitate equitable opportunities in all aspects of community life in Gadsden. The goal will be to recommend solutions that improve the social and economic future of all citizens. And again, I want to make this clear on a technical level. What this committee is doing is we're going to address a series of issues that have been brought before this council and make recommendations to the council. We do not have the authority to act unilaterally as a body. We are simply compiling the feedback that we've gotten from the community, reviewing it with subject matter experts to make some recommended solutions to the city council on how we can move forward. Again, I'll give a detailed list of the composition of the committee, but it'll be made up of some appointed educators and historians, several subject matter experts at our disposal, and then some community liaisons that will work, some younger individuals that will work interchangeably with the committee to take feedback from the community and to consolidate that into a format that we can present to the council. Again, just to clarify some technicalities, this committee has zero budget. It doesn't have any. No one is receiving a budget of funds to pursue any of this. Every bit of this is being done on a volunteer basis, including the members of the community who have reached out to be a part of this. The meetings will all be governed by the Open Meetings Act, which means anyone will have access to attendance. They'll be made public beforehand through the city clerk's office, just like with any other meeting of the zoning board or anything else. So there will be public and future notice of future meetings. Our action plan is to to hold public meetings and to receive the input on civil issues impacting the community on a range of issues. We will speak specifically about the Monuments Preservation Act or Memorial Preservation Act of Alabama. We have some attorneys who will be sitting on the committee because there is a real question about a bill like this that is written so vaguely that there's a chance that we're violating this legislation already by renaming certain streets or certain buildings in the community in everyday, day-to-day business. So we need to verify what properties in the city of Gadsden are subject to this Memorial Preservation Act and how we can legally go about adhering to those laws. We'll recommend programs and policies and activities to reduce discrimination, increase cultural competency, and to promote civil and human rights for all citizens in the community of Gadsden. And anybody who doesn't want to see civil and human rights for all citizens in Gadsden, it's probably not a good idea for you and I to even have a conversation, because I think that's a uniform thing that we all have to start with is that every single citizen of this town deserves what they are entitled to as a human being and as a member of this society. And then we'll prepare a summary of those recommendations and present them to the mayor and the council, and hopefully they'll take action. And if and when the council as a body does take action, this committee will also serve as a tool to implement any of those recommendations in the community. And that's where these community representatives and liaisons will really come in to play, where we can actually get people who will be accountable and who will follow up and stay engaged, and specifically the younger members of this community. You know, I'm a big fan of the saying, you know, you make lemonades out of lemons, and that's the way I'm trying to approach this committee. That's my goal. Is we have a very tough situation across this country, and specifically in Gadsden, we are not immune to that, and we've had some civil strife over the last several months, exacerbated by the fact that everybody's at home and we don't have football. You know, all of those things lead to a lot of tempers, and we've seen the worst out of a lot of people in this community over the last several months. And my hope is that we can take all of this energy and anger and emotion that is palpable in the room and convert it into lemonade. You know, let's take what is a bad opportunity that has brought so many of our young people out and wanting to be engaged in the political process. My intention with this committee is to try to grab a hold of those individuals and bring them closer to the political process and educate them more about what that political process is. And hopefully they turn into valuable future leaders at some point after we're all gone. So that's all I have. If there are any questions, or if Councilman Williams has anything to add.
Yeah, just a couple of just very quick points relative to what the mechanics and the structure that Councilman Wilson spoke to. We were very specific. We to avoid any seen or unforeseen conflicts. We were very clear not to have any city employees on the committee. We want to make sure we don't create anything that's difficult for them to manage as it relates to their day-to-day operations. Now, they will support in an advisory capacity, and they will support as subject matter experts. But again, none of them will be formally named as committee members. And I think, I have to give Councilman Wilson credit for this idea, but he was very specific about wanting at least a couple, if not more, members of this committee to be under the age of 30. And I think that's important because they have a perspective. They may not always understand all of the nuanced items relative to the civil rights movement, but they are living some of these issues today. And really should have a voice in the discussion. So that's one of the things I'm excited about, is having those young people actually be able to participate, and having those young people to hear from people who have actually been through some of the what many of us consider the modern day civil rights movement in the 60s. So I'm really excited about that part of it. And of course, if you're asking about the duration of this committee and how long it will be in place. I think the only answer we can offer up there is long enough to come up with a reasonable set of recommendations, and long enough to again to meet enough times to pull together a meaningful set of recommendations for the mayor and council to have presented to them. So.
I mean, ideally, I think a committee like this lasts until it's no longer needed. But for us, we're going to work expeditiously to try to get recommendations to this council for the major issues affecting our community, and hopefully that'll give us a path forward. That's the plan.
Okay.
Any questions?
Questions?
I have one question or statement, I guess.
Yes, sir.
You're stating because of the vagueness of this Alabama Preservation Act.
Mm-hmm.
I believe I heard last week that Montgomery, committee or subcommittee in Montgomery is going to look over this vagueness.
Yes, sir.
Now, you don't want to have a committee that's going to come up with something, and the new committee, or if there is going to be one in Montgomery, is going to come up with another idea. So I think if a committee is formed in Montgomery, they have to keep up with what they'll come up with, because you may come up with something that's going to be in direct against whatever they come up with.
Yes, sir, and I couldn't agree more, and that's important. And number one, there are actually amendments to the Memorial Preservation Act that were presented in the last legislative session that go in both directions. The Alabama League of Municipalities has publicly called on the Alabama legislature to allow for a variance to the Memorial Preservation Act, which would allow municipalities to relocate certain monuments to certain places that are already in some state of preservation. So the Alabama League of Municipalities has already made that recommendation to the legislature, but at the same time, there have been a couple of amendments introduced that would actually increase the fine for relocating a monument from $25,000 a one-time fee to as much as $10,000 a day for every day that the monument is not back in its original place. And again, you got to understand that the Memorial Preservation Act also includes street names. So one of the questions we have is, okay, if we rename a street, number one, is it $25,000 per street sign? If we go down a boulevard and take down 12 street signs, did we technically just rack up $300,000 in fines under the current legislation, or is that considered one name change? But to answer your question, in addition to the time that I've spent in Montgomery, we're very well connected with our state representatives and are in regular communication with them on issues like this. So we'll make sure that we'll have a direct line to that subcommittee and what the results of that are as we go through this process. And another thing I'll point out, some of the members, the subject matter experts that we'll be utilizing that are all residents here of Gadsden, have unbelievable resumes that you guys would not believe. I'm talking about folks who have been at the very top of the leadership in the National Historic Preservation Society, have played a part in Alabama's memorial and historic preservation efforts. So these are educators and historians who are literally the best in the industry that we have at our disposal that live right here in Gadsden. So I'm excited and confident that we'll get something that everybody will see as a step forward.
Yeah, I think the city has an opportunity to be proud. Never want to tell people what they should do, but obviously the city has an opportunity to be proud of a number of the people on this committee and just the in aggregate, this group. Because to Jason's point, there are a lot of bright minds on that committee, and a lot of people that are going to add some real value to the process.
Kind of have two questions. One of them is, how soon are y'all looking at meeting? Like, when are y'all going to get this started?
So I'll actually be out of town next week. So our plan, I think, is going to be for the following Tuesday to hold our first meeting. So that would be what, the 22nd of September would be the first official meeting. And that'll really be an administrative planning meeting, I think, just exchanging contact information and getting a general understanding of the working groups that we'll have. And then we'll start really trying to dig in to prioritize the list of the issues that we're going to try to address.
And then how often are y'all gonna meet? Is it gonna be a monthly thing, quarterly?
I think once a month is realistic. Initially, we'll probably have, I think initially we had talked about maybe having as many as 4 meetings where community members would have an opportunity to provide some feedback and raise issues. And then at that point, I imagine it would be kind of more of a, I don't want to say behind closed doors, but kind of an offline consolidation of all those issues and discussions of the committee to bring forward a polished recommendation.
Yeah, and a lot of what will happen in that initial meeting will involve understanding people's level of availability, because we've got college students on, in that under 30 group, you've got people that are still in school. And so in this day and age, the meeting time may conflict with whatever they've got going. So we've got to make sure that whenever we're meeting and the duration of the meetings and all of those factors kind of meet people at the point of their needs. So we'll be working through that, a lot of that in that first meeting.
So these may likely be afternoon meetings as opposed to morning meetings.
It's possible. We haven't firmly said that, but it's possible. Yeah, that's just one example of some of the things that we'll talk about in that initial meeting. If it's a necessity to make sure that we get everybody in attendance that we need to have there, then yeah, there may be some floating changes to the meeting times.
We're in a peculiar spot in American history where a lot of people can't even agree on the same set of facts. There was a Black Lives Matter protest not long ago, a bunch of counter protesters. I got there from the side as well, and they swore they weren't there to do anything racist. And then later videos turned up where they said some very undeniably racist things. So apparently we can't even agree on what is or what isn't racist, for instance. Will that complicate things? Is that part of the meetings?
I think with this group, it won't. I think what you'll see by and large is civil discourse amongst the members of this group. And the intent, I think one of the things that I didn't mention as I was giving some of the backstory as to what we were looking for in committee members is that me and Councilman Wilson were also very deliberate in identifying people that don't necessarily think like us for this committee, people that, have an opposing view, because we wanted that viewpoint at the table. But we also wanted people that could do that, and do it civilly. There are people amongst us, and one of the unfortunate things about where we are in history and what's kind of presented itself is, these types of, the season that we're in gives people who have less than honorable motives, it gives them a platform as well. And so there are people kind of nibbling around the edges of this process, trying to get in and disrupt it and make it something negative. And we're going to be very deliberate in making sure that this is not something negative, that it's definitely something that's viewed positively, that it gives us the opportunity to present some meaningful, gives this group the opportunity to present some meaningful suggestions. This is not going to be a Councilman Wilson and Councilman Williams show. These folks all are independent thinkers. We'll facilitate the discussions to a degree. And then they may decide they want to elect officers, or they may decide they want to elect a leader other than us. And that's fine. We just want to make sure that they have the opportunity to walk through this process and then come out of it with a meaningful set of recommendations for the council and the mayor.
Okay, guys, if there's no other questions, thank y'all very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.